Question for you.
Okay.
Do you think women or men pay more in car insurance?
Well, I think it's a misconception that men are better drivers than women. I think women are safer drivers, so I would assume that they pay less in car insurance.
Okay, well, as you know, car insurance rates are not one size fits all. In fact, there is a new study that shows that gender might be driving what you pay in car insurance.
Hopefully in the right
Zebra,
way.
yeah, for you, yeah, I think so. The Zebra just released fresh data on how rates differ for men and women across the country. And joining us live to break it all down is Beth Swanson with the Zebra. Beth, you are integral into putting this study together. So what does it exactly show?
Well, Tanner, basically it's showing that while women used to pay more than men in about half of our states back in 2018, now that we're in 2025 and seeing some new data, men are actually paying more in 38 states now.
Interesting. So there you go, Sam. That's your answer to your question.
What brought about the change over the last couple of years?
Right, it's a good question. Pricing models have shifted a little bit more due to state regulation, data that's been collected by insurance companies, and a lot of it just comes down to equitability that states are advocating for. They want things to be a little less biased and considering that driving should be the main focus. So there are certain states, such as Michigan, who've banned gender as a rating factor when it comes to insurance. So that's evened out the playing field a little bit more. There's also been some change in credit scores for men and women around the country in the states that still use credit. So it's a variety of factors. There's been a lot of studies into it, and some of the answers are unclear about why the shift has taken place, but it's still pretty interesting.
That is interesting. So you guys just created this study. It's out, very new here recently. How did you guys go about doing this study? Like, what were the methodologies that you guys used?
Well, we collected data from thousands of insurance rates in our information sources and studied how those have changed over the past couple of years. We gathered data from customers on our site and from our providers who give us some of that rate information from certain companies. So it was a deep dive into rates across states, zip codes for both genders, and just seeing what we could come up with and trends that way.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned that gender here, you know, there are some things in place in Michigan to kind of prevent that, but can you explain how gender is used as a rating maybe in other states in car insurance pricing?
Yes, and I heard somebody say just before we got started that they thought that maybe men weren't as safe drivers as females, and that has been the case, which is interesting. Why women paid more in the past, because typically men are slightly more of a risk for insurance companies, especially teen and young adult males tend to file more claims, be involved in more crashes. And men actually drive more miles as well. So that's an interesting tidbit there. And so that just leads to more risk for the insurer. If they're taking more chances, being on the road more, it's just a higher likelihood of filing a claim and having an accident.
Interesting. Yeah, it does make sense. I will say, well, I'm actually not going to say this about myself, but you know, I do think men tend to have a little more road rage out there, or maybe take a little more risks in terms of speed and, you know, passing people on the highway. I've definitely seen that, especially here in GR.
Absolutely. And I feel like even, you know, my husband, like if he sees the opportunity to maybe drift a little in the car in the snow, you know, he's going to try to go for it, where I'm going to be like white knuckled running down the roadways. So even just in our relationship, we prove that. But where did this pink tax come from then, from the early insurance ages through 2018?
And that's something that the data is a little unclear on too. A lot of the other factors that come into play are things like location, as I mentioned, credit score. Your driving history is number one. So the difference that men and women's rates are different by is about 2.3%. So it's pretty small in the grand scheme of price differences. So it's one of many factors, and it's just a combination. That's what people don't always realize too about car insurance, that it's not based on one or two factors. It can be your gender, your credit score, your zip code, your driving history. Driving history is a lot of it, actually, which is one of the things that Michigan has made more of a priority. They want people to, or insurance companies, to focus on driving history and claims instead of some of those other factors that might be slightly more biased.
Yeah, so you're talking about, you know, using some of our driving history a little bit more when determining that rating. But what about gender? I know you mentioned that gender is kind of banned as a factor for rating here in Michigan. Why is that, and how did that come about?
Back in 2020, Michigan changed some of their legislation based on the factors that companies could use to price policies. So Michigan banned several personal factors: gender, marital status, level of education, home ownership, because a lot of people consider those to be unfair. There's been some studies done about how zip codes in Michigan can specifically isolate certain demographics and cause them to have to pay more, which it comes down to fairness. And the people and the legislators in Michigan advocated for that to not be so much of a factor of what people pay. It should really come down to driving, is their opinion.
Something you mentioned, it comes down to zip code. Are you talking like maybe busier zip codes? Like, for example, maybe Grand Rapids, Detroit, maybe you're in Chicago, those counties that they sit in. Is that kind of what you're referring to there?
Yes, exactly. And even, Grand Rapids and Detroit, there's many zip codes within those cities. So you might have one zip code where there are more uninsured drivers residing in that spot. There might be a higher likelihood of accidents in another zip code. So wherever you choose to house your vehicle, your garaging address, that's going to be based on the statistics in that zip code in most states. So that was something that Michigan did away with, as to not negatively reinforce some of the issues that may be happening in certain zip codes, instead of focusing on how many uninsured drivers there are or rates of crime in a certain area. They're focusing more on the actual driving behaviors.
Interesting. So whereas I live in a busier part of the Grand Rapids Metro. Sam lives in a less busier part of the Grand Rapids Metro. So, I mean, it would make sense that maybe our zip codes would be on opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny and interesting. You don't necessarily realize all the things that go into determining your insurance factors there. But where does Michigan fall in the percentage difference between men and women in the United States?
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. And because of Michigan not taking gender into consideration anymore, the difference is only 0.04% between men and women. So it's got the lowest gap in the US between the two gender rates.
Oh, wow. So what are some of the other states that might have some of the higher percentage differences here? And I'm talking like, which states still use gender as a basis on their insurance rates?
Most of them still do use gender. Michigan is a handful of states that doesn't yet, but we could see that change in the coming years as well if other states tend to follow the legislation that has happened in California and Michigan and a few others. Right now, the highest gender-based rate difference states are Texas, Wyoming, Missouri, and Idaho. So those are going to be more in the 4 to 5% difference between men and women. Whereas, again, Michigan was 0.04, and then you look at Texas, it's 4.77%. So that's quite a big discrepancy when you're looking at gender-based rates in Texas.
Interesting. I mean, you also have to factor in the state of Texas, their freeway speed limits at many points are at 85 miles an hour.
Wow. Well, yeah, so their accident rates just might be higher in general.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So are there any
Right. If there's more accidents, then that's going to be an issue for the insurance companies. They're going to have to account for that.
Yes, absolutely. Are there any other kind of little hidden biases or sneaky things in your insurance that you could see maybe Michigan getting away with or trying to get away from over the next couple of years?
Michigan, with their changes in 2020, they've actually gotten rid of a lot of those more personal factors that people don't always think is relevant to your driving. Although some of the statistics have shown, like we said, male drivers can take more risks behind the wheel. Michigan has gotten away from most of those that don't have to do with your driving, which is nice for more people in Michigan. It's going to just be more equitable that way. They don't use credit score in Michigan either, so that's something that they don't have to worry about. It really is going to come down to your driving history, how you choose to operate your car. If you have a telematics device that can give your insurer real-time data on how you're driving, so that can also be helpful for saving money and keeping your rates down in the long run.
Yeah, I was going to say my insurance company actually gave me one of those devices, and
they?
I kind of got like a $30 discount on my insurance rate. So I know, look at me,
Tanner.
For a good driver. It did beep a lot. I'm going to say that, but I did get a little discount at the end of the day. I want to talk about the companies. We have a wide range of companies out there selling car insurance. And let's say that we're speaking to our viewers that might be outside of West Michigan or outside of the state in general. Are there companies that still offer gender neutral pricing for other consumers? Are they specifically looking at one thing over another outside of the state of Michigan?
Well, those rating factors are weighted differently based on the company and the state that they're in. So some companies might weigh credit slightly more than they would weigh your location. It kind of just depends on the company and their formula for how they're going to calculate their rates and what they're allowed to do based on state regulations. Insurance is regulated at the state level, and a lot of people don't realize that either. So if you move from one state to another, you could see a pretty big difference in your car insurance, maybe lower or higher. Just kind of depends on how they weigh those factors. There's a growing trend with more equitable practices in the insurance industry. So I think we can expect to see some of those change in the future. We might see more states going away from credit and gender. Every year, there's some states that change some regulations. So that could be something that we see in the near future.
And if viewers want to dive a little bit deeper into this, where can they learn more about the data?
Well, our website, The Zebra, we've got a great resource center with all kinds of good information. And my colleague Susan put together the article that documents all the differences between gender. So we've got a great article on there that talks about who pays more for car insurance and why.
All right, Beth Swanson, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Of course, that is available on the Zebra's website there. Beth, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good one.